so that the direction of the picture is in the script. Everything is in the script.
Now I'd like to jump into your writing style. So these differ so much from people to people. Some people need like an absolute quiet room. Others need to be like blasting music. So I'd kind of like to hear, what have you discovered works for you? Jenna, I'd love to start with you because, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, this book that's about to come out is your fourth book?
It's my third book.
Your third book.
I'm working on my fourth book.
You're working on your fourth
shelters.
One.
Yeah.
That's a lot of writing. You've published a whole bunch of essays. Now, you're working on scripts. So I'm super excited to hear, like, how are you able to just kind of like focus and get all of your thoughts on paper? And does it also differ for you? Like, do you have one kind of style for your academic work? Do you have a different style for your creative? Does it change? Like, kind of what's that process like for you?
That's an interesting question, because right now I'm writing a new book and a new screenplay at the same time. So I did discover I can't do them both in the same day. I work on the book 4 days a week and on the screenplay 3 days a week. But people always say, you write so fast. And that's not true. I just write a lot, And so I'm just, I think it just comes down for me to discipline. And it's like putting the hard hat on and clocking, I don't ever wait for inspiration, because I would never write if that was the case. And I just put in my hours, and some days are hard and not much happens. But then I find the next day that all of that kind of wheel turning is productive. And I like during the summer, I'll put on baseball games. I can watch baseball and write at the same time. And that works really well for me. I don't need to have it super quiet. I don't want it really loud. I just put in my hours, basically propped up on the couch with my laptop, putting in my hours. So, and
do you schedule it, or is it just kind of like a habit where you just?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've written a dissertation, the books, the essays, the screenplays. I've never written past 5 in the afternoon.
Wow.
And I like morning, but I have horses, and so I have to. I'm with the horses in the morning, and then I come home and write in the afternoons. So it's pretty much. And I'm a meditator and a yogi. And with the horses and all that stuff. So I think all of that keeps me pretty grounded. And so I'm not too scattered, and I just know what works.
Yeah.
And I teach writing. And these are the things I try to teach my students is like, don't follow my prescription. What works the best for you, and then stick to it. And so, and they have very different writing habits. A lot of them are at 3:00 in the morning. I've never done that. So anyway.
Oh, very cool. Thanks, Jenna. Jamie, what about you? Do you have one style you like to stick to? Have you explored different ones? What's your writing style?
So, I think Jenna's spot on when she says that everyone's different. When you're talking about writing in the morning, you've never written past 5 p.m. I don't think I've ever written before 5 p.m. So I am very much, an evening writer. And that's just when I am most alert and kind of like focused in on creativity and stuff like that. What I do in the mornings is I live about an hour away from the school I teach at. And so my commute every day, I'm either listening to podcasts or I am just hashing out story in my head, where sometimes I am like saying lines to myself out loud in my head. My wife thinks it's weird when she walks by our office. I'm reading, dialogue out loud, but just that, I guess that like alone time in the car where I am able to just cut out the world and process, okay, what are the beats that I have to hit to get to this point? A lot of writers talk about how stories always have second act issues where exactly how you want to start the story and then where you want to get, but then that middle act just is kind of blah, right? And so when I'm driving and I have that hour, to an hour back from work, I am able to just like, all right, so here are beats that need to happen to get there. Now, what are some events that I can do to lead up to those beats and all that stuff? That's kind of my process, I guess. And then when I get home, I am ready to hit the ground running and start start putting words on the page. So that's kind of
I
my
love it.
process.
Well, very cool. Yeah, very, very different processes. And I love it. It's what works, what works for each and one of you. Charlize, what about you? How do you, especially being in the medical field, how do you kind of differentiate these two completely different worlds? Do you have to create a whole separate world to go into the creative writing world? Do you find that it's all kind of there once you sit down? What's your process like?
So I'm a little bit scattered. The good part about writing is that it's an escape. So I have very stressful days at work. So I actually look forward to, I do my 9 to 5, and then I come home and do my 5 to 9, which is, writing and or thinking up an idea. And sometimes I have ideas for different projects. And so my goal every day is to at least write something down. So it could be a week where I've maybe started 2 different stories, and then sometimes those stories get put on the shelf, and then I'll start 2 more, and then a month later I'll come back to those original 2, because my brain, because it's working so hard all the time, it's hard to do a lot in those 4 hours that I have of just calm time. But I do always make it back to those stories. So I have countless notebooks of stories in different phases. I have a lot of titles in my notes app. And so in those 4 hours after work, I just return to either one of those. And it may sound like I never get anything completed, but somehow I do. So I don't know how to explain it, but it happens. So
I love it. Do you set yourself that limit when you say, you write from 5 to 9? Is it like, hey, after 9, I should stop and go to sleep because I have a long day tomorrow?
Yeah, it's my body that tells me to go to sleep, because by then I'm nodding off and it's like, okay, I need to get into bed.
Oh, very cool. Thanks. It's very fascinating. Mike, what about you? What's your...
Let's see. So my earliest influences were stand-up and sketch comedy, and also I also like comic strips, which I think is huge for learning how to write in rhythm, because so much of writing comedy is beat, 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 joke, beat, 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 joke. And so you have 3 panels of John not being able to find Garfield, and then the fourth panel is him in the lasagna tray. So I think that was big for me to learn how to write comedy. My thing is I'm a lot like Jenna, actually, where it's living in LA and working in the industry is everybody talks about creating, but a lot of people, but sometimes they're not actually doing it, which is sort of a shady thing to say, I guess. But it's so important to just sit down and writer's block doesn't exist. Pretend it doesn't exist. Write down and just sit down and start doing something. It sucks to say, but it's important. And so the altar that I worship at is really the altar of page count. At the end of the day, you just got to sit down and do it. So every day, because my thing with work is that I'm working on sets sometimes I'll work 7 days a week and I won't write anything. And some days we'll be on a writer's strike and I won't work for 3 weeks at a time. So I have to sit down and bang something out, because that's the only way I feel that I'm doing something. And so I write whenever I'm not on set, whether that's 1 day a week or 0 days a week or 7 days a week. So that's big for me. And so gradually you build that library, and you have to act as though you'd be doing it even if the industry didn't exist. Even if film didn't exist, even if I wasn't here in LA, I'd still have to write, because it's just what I do.
Right.
So it just comes from a place of the desperation to tell as many stories as you can before you die, to be perfectly frank.
When you sit down to write, do you say hey, today I'm going to write at least 5 pages? Or is it just hey, if it's 1 page, it's 1 page. If it's 10 pages, it's 10 pages?
No, it's got to be 5 pages, or I feel like I didn't do anything.
Oh, wow. I hit that up.
Yeah, no, you actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So either that or I'm outlining. But it's a tricky, outlining's tricky, because if I spend too long outlining, then I start overstuffing things with jokes, and then I'm over page count. So you have to know exactly when to stop the outlining process and to begin the actual pen to paper, screenplay begin process.
Dang. Oh, very cool. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Jason, what about you? What's your writing process like?
I equate my writing process a lot to a broken lawnmower, where... And before I explain that, real quick, I want to give a shout out to Jamie. I also say my dialogue out loud and have learned I can't write with my wife in the room because I will do that and then I'll look over at her and she'll be holding back laughter, not because I'm saying anything particularly funny. It's just I look like a huge dork. So
But you can believe it's because what you wrote is so funny. So it gives you that like, it works.
it's usually if I write something funny, I will call her over and she hates it because I've stopped whatever she's doing and been like, check out this joke. But anyway,
The broken lawnmower.
yes, because my process is I got to sit down and start writing and nothing will happen because I'm just sitting there. And so I got to go and do something else for a little bit and then I'll come back and try and write. And I could do something like, and it's about like 3 or 4 times of me sitting down to write and nothing happening before I start actually getting into a groove. But once I get in that groove, I can write. It just takes like an hour or 2 hours for me to sit there and have nothing happen before everything can happen.
And do you sit down already with like an idea and you just don't know how to express it? Or is it just you sit down with like a completely blank slate?
It'll be one or the other. Sometimes I'll be at a point in the script or the outline where I'm like, I know what needs to happen later, but I have to, that's my biggest problem.
Second
Kind of
act
fill the
thing,
gap
but yeah.
between how I began and how I'm going to end, what happens in the middle. And so I'll be sitting there trying to figure out what's going to happen to get these characters from point A to point B.
Yeah, it's that second act thing that I think Jamie was mentioning. I
Mhm.
guess it's a common denominator here. Well, I think it's fascinating. Everybody has such different writing styles, and I think like a lot of you said, you find what works for you. You experiment. Like Jana said, you don't copy. Even if your teacher tells you this is what I do, it doesn't mean this is what you should do. It just means play with it, see if it works, and if it does, great. Clearly, this has all worked for you guys because what you created is amazing.
So that the direction of the picture is in the script. Everything is in the script.